Sweet. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks very much to the GFF for the opportunity to share my enthusiasm with you all about mass timber. So as Tim said, I'll be discussing some of the work that we've done, some trends that we're seeing in the Southeast, some things that are upcoming. First, just so you know who's actually talking to you here, who we are at Equilibrium. We are a structural engineering firm. We design in all materials, but I think it's safe to say that timber is our favorite material to design in, and we are very much a timber-first firm. We've been doing this, I've been at the company about 6 years, and I kind of planted our flag here in Atlanta and in the US. Prior to that, our only office was in Vancouver, BC. But since 1998, we've had a focus on timber, and we're actually doing mass timber projects before you could even get CLT in North America by using some creative solutions. Like I said, we're based in Vancouver. We have an office here in Atlanta now that's growing. We also have an office in Paris, France that's growing as well. I'm not so good at keeping this slide up to date, but our team is really good at designing timber buildings, so this is some of our team here, and a couple are out here today. So getting into the projects. First, timber is used in a wide variety of projects. There's certain projects that definitely get a lot of the limelight. When it comes to mass timber, it's usually the bigger ones, the sexier ones. But we do a ton of work up in, of course, British Columbia, where we're based. And there's a lot of schools that are built in timber. There's a lot of First Nations community centers that we do that are built in timber. There's single-family homes that are built in mass timber. It's not only limited to kind of large commercial buildings and institutional buildings, although we of course do that as well. In the US, some of the projects that we've completed, and most of these were actually done before we had a US office. I guess one of the things about being early leaders in the space, we got sought out to work all over before any of our competitors were starting to catch up. So the top 3 projects here are all university projects: Oregon State, University of Arkansas, and UMass. And the bottom left there, Google's first mass timber office building, which we completed 2 years ago now. And if you've ever been through the Raleigh-Durham Airport, you'll recognize that one in the bottom right. I have a handful of projects on the go. I'm sure everyone's eyes, if you haven't seen it before, are drawn to the one on the bottom right. I will speak to that one in a little bit. So, taking a little bit of a dive here on a handful of the projects that we've done, and kind of focusing on the Southeast, kind of closing the circle in around Atlanta as we go through this. Raleigh-Durham Airport. This is a very large expansion of their airport there, and it uses a hybrid roof. It uses hybrid glulam with steel trusses, and the critical part of these trusses is the connections. I don't know if this will... Yeah, there's no hope here. Let me go back here. Maybe. All right. Where the steel vertical post meets the glulams there, it's a very sensitive connection. A lot of different forces happening there. Really difficult connection to design. The engineer of record on this project had actually designed the whole thing, including the connections. That was their design on the left. It probably would have worked structurally, but would have been extremely difficult to fabricate and to install. And we got brought into this project as kind of specialty engineers to help redesign these connections. We brought in technology from Europe, which was called the Bircha connector, and redesigned these connections with that. This product didn't have any approvals in the US, so we had to oversee a $200,000 testing program to prove that it worked. And after we did that, using these connectors, we saved $1.5 million on a $7 million timber package. So one thing to know about timber construction is there's a lot going on in these details, and there's a lot of opportunity to optimize these details and still develop something that totally meets the aesthetic goals of the project. Adobe Hall is a university project. It's a residence hall at the University of Arkansas. 4 stories. And the importance of this project is that it really showed that mass timber can be built in the South competitively on cost. This is actually in the, Laura, what's the name of that document? Business Case Studies for Mass Timber by Woodworks. This is one of the case studies. A very small premium to build this in mass timber as opposed to conventional materials, but they're getting something like 25% higher rent rates in this building. And so it's a very simple post and beam building, glulam floors, and a little bit of expression here in the common spaces with these nice hybrid trusses. I think this project was completed about 2018 or 2019, so a relatively early one here in the scheme of things. So ADM was my first project at Equilibrium that got completed. And it's worth noting that it's not this whole building. This is a 1980s office building in Washington, D.C. I believe it was 7 or 8 stories, and then did a 3-story mass timber vertical expansion. And this was the first building, as far as I know, to be built in the U.S. with a 2-hour rating for exposed timber, 2-hour fire rating. So we had to oversee a fire testing program, which was done at Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio. We designed all these connections. There were not a lot of off-the-shelf connections available at this time, so everything was custom steel connections. And then put one of our full-size connections and baked it for 2 hours with fully applied load, no protection on it to prove that it could withstand a 2-hour fire, which is what, of course, we had to do for a building of this size. That was all successful, and the project is now built and operational up in DC. And since then, there's been a handful of other projects now that have done 2-hour rated construction, and a handful more planned, including in Atlanta. Southstone Yards is a spec office building in Frisco, Texas. It's on a campus there. It's going to have, there's another building being designed now. This one was supplied by SmartLam, and we worked with them on the project. So it's a post and beam building. The framing layout in general is very similar to the T3 that's here in Atlantic Station. And you can see what that looks like here in this a little oversaturated photo, in my opinion. Used Alaskan yellow cedar columns on the outside. It's important when you're putting timber on the outside of the building that you use appropriate detailing, use appropriate materials, consider pressure treating and so on. AYC is a great product because it's naturally rot resistant. So getting more and more current and perhaps a bit more closer to home in Magnolia Springs. This is one that we're doing with No Architecture, who's here in the room today. It's a cabin, vacation home basically, and uses, again, pretty simple glulam post and beam frame, CLT, roof deck, a conventional floor that's elevated for a couple of different reasons, but just a nice simple project, simply detailed, will be a little bit more expensive than probably if built conventionally, but obviously delivers a unique aesthetic that you can't get with conventional construction. Sticking in Alabama here for a second, Dothan City Hall. Of course, Dothan is the home of SmartLam here in the Southeast, so no surprise that we're working with SmartLam again on this one. I probably should have tried to find a better rendering, but I snipped this one from a local news report. And now we all know how much this thing costs. Anyway, 3-story mass timber, City Hall, not so different in scale from the one in Brookhaven. Our responsibility on this project was we designed all the CLT. You can see there's long cantilevers at the roof. There's a point-supported canopy as well. Designed all the connections for all the CLT and all the glulam. And this snip is taken from the CAD work model. So one important thing to know about modern mass timber is that it goes through a digital fabrication process, right? And this is really one thing that distinguishes it from the old school heavy timber, is that you build a fabrication model such as this one, and these models have everything in it. I mean, typically they will have every screw, everything down to millimeter precision. And then this model is then what's used and picked apart piece by piece in order to drive the fabrication equipment that will fabricate all these glulam beams, columns, and CLT panels. And this project is in production, just started production now in Dothan. So it'll be built next year. The Macon FBO terminal. So I have learned since starting this project that Macon is the home of Otis Redding and also the home of the Allman Brothers. So a pretty significant musical history in Macon. As I understand it, this is basically the front door to Macon for people who are potentially going to come in and make investments there. It's a corporate airport terminal, so if you have some hotshot flying in that's going to build a new factory or set up a new business in the region, this is where they're going to come in. And the building that they had there was pretty aged and maybe not the best front door for your VIP type folks that are coming into town to make investments. So they wanted to build a new building in order to showcase their heritage a little bit, and they made it in the shape of a guitar. And when I first saw this, I thought, no one's going to be able to tell it's a guitar. And they're like, Matt, it's at an airport. I said, oh, right. So it's going to be some really nice lighting, so you can see it at night. This project is in the early stages of construction now. It's not so dissimilar from Dothan City Hall in the timeline, probably in production now in Dothan. I think one important thing about this project is, we all see all these mass timber buildings that are really nice boxes. And mass timber is not limited to being a big shoebox in form. It's definitely the most efficient way to do it, but you don't have to be limited to that. You can get creative. You can have curvaceous elements like these. You can see how we frame this here with these kind of radial beams. And we also have one of my favorite terms, SRT, structural round timber. Sounds really wild. These are logs. And that's what these two big circular columns are here in the middle. Locally sourced, of course. One of the little strategies that we used on this project was, actually I might step back here. A couple slides if I can. Okay. You can see there's a balcony in this cutaway view that wraps around the entire building. We wanted to use the same framing from inside to out. There's a structural step when you go from inside the building to out on the balcony. So what we did was we dropped all the beams and then we put spacers on top of the beams to support the CLT within the envelope. And aside from enabling us to then use the same element inside and out, what that did is it allows us a space to run our building services. So you don't see any in this image, but you can see how that beam is dropped. It's kind of nice to have the lowest thing, kind of your ceiling that you're really looking at, be a glulam beam and not be a mechanical duct or a run of low voltage cable. So a nice strategy that had kind of two benefits here on this project. This is one key thing about designing a mass timber building is you are not just showing off the structure. You're going to be showing off everything that's up on that ceiling. And so you need to find ways to integrate that in a way that is appropriate for the budget, but also gives you the aesthetic that you're looking for. Now in Atlanta, this is the project that's up over here by No Architecture. Got started on this one with these guys. It is a 3-story vertical expansion of what is currently a 1-story block building on Edgewood Ave. It's going to be residential up in these 3-story portions, I think 4 different residences, if I remember correctly. And the idea is to save the building on the first floor and basically do a surgical insertion of the vertical structure that will drop through what is currently the roof. Hopefully stage the construction to keep the coffee shop, which is a neighborhood icon there, I think, operational. And again, it's a pretty simple mass timber frame with some other elements there for lateral support. And that is one of the accelerator grant recipients that was part of the ceremony yesterday. This is one that's an accelerator grant recipient for this year. This project is in downtown Atlanta on a pretty small, by today's standards, site. I think we have about an 8,000 square foot floor plate. We're going to go about 5 stories with a boutique mass timber office building there. It's in a pretty historic part of town, and so the idea is to essentially make it blend in to the existing building stock there. It's kind of a new approach to what they have, right? There's a lot of, believe it or not, in this part of downtown, old school, heavy timber, like early 20th century buildings that were factories, offices, and so on. And so the idea is to build a modern take on one of those buildings and have it blend in down there. It's going to have an offset core, you can see on the left here from this floor plan, and then just a lot of open office space with a lot of visible timber elements that you can walk up to and touch and smell and interact with. So last little bit for me here is what I see looking into my crystal ball, I suppose, in terms of upcoming trends in the Southeast for mass timber. Number one, universities have been early adopters of mass timber and have really kind of helped to spur mass timber throughout the country. And this is from the Candida building at Georgia Tech, one of the first mass timber projects here in Georgia and in Atlanta. This was actually my first mass timber project when I was with the previous firm, and what got me interested in it and kind of led me to where I am now. But I expect universities are going to keep carrying that torch. Clemson, I would say, is now a timber-first university when they're looking at building on their campus. Auburn is starting to get that way as well. Tech here is certainly interested, but maybe a couple steps behind those other two, and I think gonna catch up. Big Tech is really interested in building in mass timber. This is the first office building. We've done two now for Google out in Sunnyvale, California, and it's without a doubt some of the favorite building stock that they have in their portfolio. This project has been cleaning up on the awards circuit, and a really nice place for the Googlers, as they're called, to go and work every day. So I think that trend is going to continue in big tech, and of course we have big tech here in Atlanta, so I don't think it's long until we start seeing a big tech office building or two here in town. Data centers, believe it or not, are also something that are being looked at, and there's been one or two built now using mass timber components by these big tech companies. And so kind of in that thread, one you may not think of perhaps is like light industrial. But I think between light industrial and the big tech office, there's kind of this intersection there of data centers, right? And so I think we are starting to see that. I'm not going to stand here and tell you guys something that's not. This is a more expensive way to build what is a trucking terminal here. There's no cheaper way to enclose a space than a pre-engineered metal building. However, wouldn't you rather work here than in a pre-engineered metal building? It's a really nice space. The last thing is going taller, and I think Laura will probably speak a little bit more to this after I go here, but there is this code change that's coming here in Georgia on January 1st, which is that in type 4B buildings, you're now going to be able to expose 100% of the mass timber surfaces in those spaces. And this is a really key change because it opens up this space, this kind of height in the marketplace where timber is not competing so much against other materials. And so it's like Too Short taught us, you got to get in where you fit in when it comes to mass timber here. So for multifamily residential, which is what we're seeing being built, tall in timber, at low construction heights, you're generally competing against stick framing. Very hard to compete against stick framing, at least on a cost basis. The sweet spot, this is where we get in with mass timber, is in this range where you're above where you're competing with stick frame, but you're below where concrete is really efficient, right? Because concrete relies on rinse and repeat up and up and up. So in this kind of 8 to 12 story range, I think is where we're going to see a lot more mass timber construction. And, spoiler alert, we are seeing a lot more mass timber construction in this range. And even above this range, if you can get a variance from the authority having jurisdiction to go taller, but allow some of that timber to remain exposed. So stay tuned for some upcoming projects in and around Atlanta that might be fitting what we're looking at here. I gotta tell you guys, I nailed it. There's 10 seconds left on this counter. So, all right, thank you everyone.